Hey guys, good morning. Today we are going to discuss John chapter 9 verse 13 to 34 in our Bible study. And before starting our Bible study, we have to read these passages twice or thrice for better understanding. So we are going to see subtopics from verse 13 to 34. The Pharisees meet with the man and his parents, and the man reports to the Pharisees what happened. The Pharisees are divided on Jesus. The man claims Jesus is a prophet. The Jews call in and talk to the man's parents. The Pharisees claim Jesus is a sinner. The man sticks to the fact that he was cured of blindness. The Pharisees revile Jesus and his disciples. The man defends Jesus. The Pharisees excommunicate him. And now we are going to prepare some questions for our Bible study discussion. The first question we can prepare: do you think it is a coincidence that many of Jesus recorded miracles occurred on the Sabbath day? The second question we can see: why were the man's parents afraid to take a stand? Are you sometimes afraid to take a stand, and why? And what is ironic about verse 24? What does this reveal about the Pharisees' hearts? Next question we can see: talk about the man's response. Why is this a great response? What can we learn from this about how to debate or respond to unbelievers and critics? Have any of you doctors ever heard about a person born blind who was healed? And the next question we can see: what is the problem with the Pharisees' attitude that made it impossible for them to learn from others? And what kind of attitude should we have so that we can learn from others? And next question and final question: what does Jesus means and that he came into the world for judgment? Didn't we read earlier that he didn't came into the world for judgment? And related to this topic, we have some statements from different chapters. Nicodemus was one who believed in Jesus because of his signs. People would not believe Jesus' message. The crowdly are listed with murderers and sorcerers as people who will be left out of the kingdom of heaven. Don't be scared of those who kill the body but can do nothing to the soul. There are many references in the New Testament where fear of the Jews kept the disciples or others from doing something they should have done. Peter is one example. And Paul was not ashamed. The boldness we have should encourage us to be bold. Paul should speak out boldly, and so should we. We should desire not to be put to shame in anything, but with all boldness to let Christ be exalted through our body, whether by life or death. If we have wickedness in our hearts, God will not hear us. And God is opposed to the proud, but gives grace to the humble. When you look at 1 Peter chapter 5 and verse 5. Now we are going to discuss verse by verse from 13 to 15. In these verses, the beggar reported the Pharisees what happened. It seems like a lot of Jesus' miracles took place on the Sabbath. As Jesus mentioned before, this was a day to do good. He used it for that. At the same time, I think it was likely he wanted to straighten out some of the misconceptions the Pharisees and the other Jews had about the Sabbath and restore it to the kind of day that God intended. The Pharisees were divided. Some believed in Jesus because of his works, others said that he was a Sabbath breaker. Nicodemus was one who had believed in Jesus because of his signs. The blind man, like many Jews at the time, thought Jesus was a prophet. The Pharisees didn't believe that this man had been blind, so they called in his parents to testify. When his parents both affirmed he was their son, they could not, according to their own law, disbelieve it, because where two or three witnessed to a fact, it was deemed true. His parents, however, did not want to get involved as to how he could now see. They instead chose to sit on the fence. The reason they didn't want to get involved is because they were scared of the Jews. They didn't want to get kicked out of the synagogues. To them, good standing in the community and respect from others was more important than the truth. They were afraid to take a stand because they didn't want to face the consequences. how should we as believers respond to a situation like this? We need to be willing to take a stand for God no matter what the consequences are. It is far better to please God than to please man. Don't be scared of losing your job, friendship, or society's or respect. We need to bold and courageous to take a stand for God. Even it means sacrificing something. Being a Christian is not something to be ashamed of. It is not something to hide. It's something to freely confess before others. Godly principles also are not something to be ashamed of or hidden either. These days there are a lot of wishy-washy people who are unwilling to commit and unwilling to stand on any principles. They say that everything is relative and dependent on your viewpoint. No, as believers we need to be committed and bold. We have Christ as our solid rock foundation. Stand on him because the gates of hell cannot break it. Verse 24 to 34, the man is called back in a second time. First they try to confuse the point by saying that Jesus is a sinner. It is so ironic that they who are supposed to be teaching people who to live righteously could be excited even if Jesus was a sinner. Obviously they just wanted power and didn't really care about people's spiritual lives. I love the beggar's response in this section of scriptures. He almost surely was not a learned man, since he was a blind and beggar. Yet he presents a great argument. He doesn't have much experience and can't answer all their questions, but he is a person who knows what happened to him and is not going to be railroaded by the group think. Again and again he comes back to the point that Jesus healed him from his blindness. This was a great sign and one that they should believe in it. It also seems like the more he talks, the more he is convinced that Jesus is from God and the miracle was from God. The man's logic in verse 30 to 34 is irrefutable. The Old Testament does teach that God doesn't listen to the sinner. When you look at Psalm 66 verse 18. The Pharisees, however, have no desire to listen to reason or actually think about what the man said. Their attitude is completely frightful, and they don't think they can learn anything from anyone. In the end, they put him out of the synagogue. The man's boldness cost him something. He was cast out of the local synagogue. This would cost him his status in society. We'll see in a minute that this was a completely worth it, and that what he gained was much greater than what he lost. From the Pharisees we see what we should not do, that is to be frightful and not listen to others. When you look at 1 Peter chapter 5 verse 5, no matter how poor or unlearned someone is, we can learn something from them. Do not look down on others and think that you are much wiser and smarter and cannot learn anything from them. You can be humble and listen to others. God wants us to learn from each other. That is the big reason he gives us the church to fellowship with. Be a learner. Seek out others' opinions and thoughts even if you think you know more about the Bible than them. Don't talk down to them in a condescending way, or laugh at them if they ask a question sincerely that you think has an obvious answer. You guys can learn from me, but I can also learn from you, and you can also learn from each other. But you have to have a humble attitude and make the effort. Verse 35 to 41. What does Jesus means in verse 39, right? We already. And that he came into the world for judgment. Didn't we read earlier? He didn't come into the world for judgment. So Jesus went to find him to ask him to believe. Jesus told him that he himself was the Son of Man, the Messiah. The man had a great response. In complete faith he believed and worshipped Jesus. Jesus did not reject the man's worship as angels do, but he accepted it because it was the proper action. When you look at John chapter 3 and John chapter 9 verse 39, the word judgment here has been by some understanding in the sense of condemnation. The effect of my coming is to condemn the world, but this meaning does not agree with those places where Jesus says that he came not to condemn the world. What are the main points we have learned from this passage? Cause for suffering, work for God while we have the opportunity, don't be afraid to take a stand, how to defend our faith. These are the 4 things we have learned from this passage. I hope you can understand. God bless you. Thank you. We'll meet in our next Bible study.